I myself, I just woke up, and hopefully that you're in good mood as we listen through the lecture. So I'm sorry that this is the second session for the subject, even though there should have been four lecture sessions already. So I'll need to catch up with the other two, um, whether through a recorded session or through another joint session with the class. So either way, we'll catch up, and hopefully that you can also, or you are available in those sessions to learn the other contents of the topic. So today's discussion will cover just a welcoming session on building systems design, like what you need to prepare, what you need to read in particular. Okay. This is a lecture course with a laboratory component. So it's necessary that you have a reference material and you use this reference material for the succeeding lessons. So just before I dive into the slide, I forgot to share this files to all sections, but for section A4, I've already uploaded a reference folder under topic 1.1. So you may check them later, and maybe later I can also upload for the other sections. There's the reference for PD 1096. This is the original law about the National Building Code of the Philippines. And then the second one, this is the illustrated version of the NBCP, because you know laws don't have guided drawings and sketches. So there was an initiative way back in 2009 to create an illustrated version. So this is available here on the second part. And in the third part, this is the article on the history, a little history about the NBCP and how this history will affect the way that we design and the way that we practice our professions together with architects and allied professionals, of which I'll discuss a little bit about it. And hopefully, on that part, you unlearn some things. Okay, base na mo prior knowledge nga. Maybe this was influenced by someone or um, by others. So I'll try to fix that and sort of inject the shall I say popular belief in terms of confusions when you practice either civil engineering or architecture. So let's begin with a little history on how did we come up with the National Building Code of the Philippines. There was a big problem in urbanization, housing, and settlement design in the 1970s. Now, take note that Metro Manila was designed to be an old Spanish city. And when it's an old Spanish city, even though it's a city, most houses will have 2 to 3 story high, and most are 2 story actually. You will have a 1 story house, but that will be prone to disasters. Kung magkasunog, your old nipa hut will be just burnt in just a fraction of a second, no? Or if you have a barong-barong lang, then when storms come, really your house will not survive. So Spanish or the Spanish Empire introduced to us the bahay na bato, as you saw here in this picture in the left-hand part. The bahay na bato, or sometimes also called bahay na tisa, because the tiles were made out of tisa, were the common designs. And because roads were not available until 1800s, so inana kadugay ang pag-move nato no, sa construction. Remember that the Spanish Empire discovered the Philippines, even the Portuguese rather, in the 1500s. So it took us 300 years to realize that we need to expand because our population are expanding. So before 1970s and on the start of 1800s, the main mode of transportation was by boat. Okay, so all houses, even in Binondo Canal, even in Pasig River. That's why Pasig is very relevant, not just because of Vico, no? Most houses face the river. Okay? Kaya wala sila balay nga naa sa dalan. All of their houses were near rivers or waterways. Kaya wala may dalan. So they had to build their houses near them to access the main transportation trunk line. So maskin pag nanay kuryente doon nga time, all of their houses were facing the river. Even if you go to Pasig River now, majority of the old structures are facing to the river. And they have their mini port. So like this one, matingala mo nga ang ilang suba has stairs. The design of that stair is to accommodate kaning gitawag na to rickshaw nga mga boat. And asa man ipadulong ang rickshaw nga boat? It goes to the market, it goes to the church, it goes to whichever major infrastructure facility that there is. So it became a problem in the 1970s because it's a population of over 1 million in Metro Manila. So at that time, planners were thinking na how do we fix this problem? At that time, it was the Marcos regime. Okay, I call it a regime because they have this issue back then. And at that time, one solution was to send out populations from Metro Manila and transfer them to other locations. So one location that they were able to um, sort of transfer some of the population is in Southern Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So manang matingala mo, nganong na Ilonggo sa Cotabato, nganong na ay Waray sa dapit sa kanang Surigao, nganong nag-move na sila. That was the effort of the government to decongest Metro Manila. Tanan manggod at the 1970s pang year, everything is in Metro Manila. The schools are in Metro Manila, the hospitals, the government centers are in Metro Manila. So to transition that, parang ma-spread out o ma-diversify ang kwarta sa gobyerno. Okay. Naramay siya sa isa ka place, no? Everyone has to move out. And when they had to move out, they had to copy designs from Metro Manila to build their houses, to build their infrastructure, to build everything. So from that design, nga we need to move, what will be the standard? And that was the question. Unsa may standard na dayon sa balay nga gi-move man ta from one place to the other kay pwede man nga lahi-lahi og design, di ba? Or awaton ang design from Metro Manila. So to create a blueprint for everything, NBCP was born, the National Building Code of the Philippines. But prior to that, it was Republic Act 6541. But unsay naa sa 6541? Republic Act 6541 was just to empower the government to create a standard for contractors. So it was primarily made for money. Okay? Government has money. How will government transfer the money to contractors? So Republic Act 6541 was created. In that, it was stipulated that you need someone to design and it was not yet verified. Kinsa man ang someone? Will it be any engineer or architect? And at that year, 1970s, any engineering degree can design a house. So whether you are an electrical engineer, you can build a house. Even if you're a technical vocational graduate, you can build a house. So at that time, there was no clear distinction of what is an engineer and what are the limits of your profession. So even in this picture, this is a picture of Taft Avenue because everyone was gaining traction on money. So na-realize na sa Pinoy nga if you work, you get money, you get paid, you can buy a car. So muna siya nga na congest ang atong Taft Avenue and major trunk lines. So apart from that, I think ang government na there must be a design that can support housing, transportation, and even public spaces. So NBCP was born out of that thinking. We can create one code where everything is referred on. So tanan spacing requirements sa dalan, sa balay, sa alleyway was based from the NBCP. And we know that because it was in the time of Marcos, and Marcos wants to institute laws para ma-retain ang iyang power. That's a strategy of kanang emperor mo ng regime ang tawag sa iya, okay? Para associate tanan laws sa iya, gipapaspas og create tanan laws. So until now, the NBCP that we're using is the document that he signed in the 1970s. So inana siya ka-powerful. From power, from water, from even laws on the air, gikan na kang Marcos na time. So muna nga lisod kaayo nato i-transition nato development kita na naka-refer sa 1970s. So isa na siya ka-problem. And from 1970 to 1972, the transition from RA 6541 to PD 1096 was enacted. So this nullification took effect on September 21, 1972, but it doesn't really create a controlling power from the government because martial law was declared. So it was just unlikely and wrong timing na anang building code ng martial law. And you know, martial law took in effect several years until 1980s. So that span of time, daghan ang tatag na buhat for development. But because Marcos declared martial law and most of the money were not sent to where it was intended to based on these laws, so walay na buhat nga development for that long time. 10 years, okay? In 1981-82 man ta nag-change to people power. So I hope you understand that concept ba nga, and ang people power is really relevant, especially when you talk about the building code. Okay, the law was there, it was never reviewed. It just so happened that because it was martial law, everything that the government and the president wants will be implemented. So walay nag-check sa building code nga, will it be okay for everyone? Nga na inani ang size, nga na inani ang mga kanang dimensions. And until now, we're using it and we're paying for it na daghan gitag problems sa spacing requirements because it wasn't reviewed and it wasn't carefully thought of at that time. Okay? So muna karon nga there is another version of PD 1096 which is updated, but because in the Philippines there are levels of laws, you cannot repeal a law until you create a new law. Okay? So what you can do to update the law is an implementing rules and regulations. That's why from 1977 to 2005, PD 1096 had an IRR. So muna nga pag magbasa mo documents karon, take note that there's the basic law, PD 1096, which has very few standards. Okay? I-update na siya. And the updated version is the IRR at about 2005. Okay? So grabe nga span, no? Taas kayo ang lag na wala gid siya na update. So in this 1977 to 2005 revision, there is this unclear boundary between two professions, and this one caused the rift between architects and civil engineers. Why? From section 206 of the original law, it says that no person shall be appointed as a building official unless he possesses the following qualifications: a Filipino citizen and of good moral character, that's okay as long as you're born in the Philippines. But the second one, a duly registered architect or civil engineer. Okay? That really creates confusion. Okay, the building official approves all the building plans in a local government. And if you put here or, what should it mean? Will it be a person who is both an architect and a civil engineer, or just a civil engineer with an architecture background? So daghan kina-confuse ani. In fact, architects would claim that this is a typographical error, but when they review the original text of the law, it really says that architect or civil engineer. So what was the reason back then? One primary reason was that if we are to implement the building code all over the Philippines at that time in the 1970s, we have a dearth of architects. You can only find an architect at that time in Metro Manila. And if you need the architect to sign all documents in the 1970s, well, every individual will have to go to Metro Manila para lang makapapirma. So it created a confusion, and so the law was a little bit revised before it was sent out that it should include or civil engineer, because at that time civil engineers were many. Mas dagan man engineer kaysa architect. So that created some confusion, and ang interpretation sa architects was that this law is temporary kay gamay man ang population sa architect. So by the time yung mudaghan na unta sila, aya din unta nila bawion nga tanggalon ang or civil engineer. So that created more rift. Kay dili mo sagot ang civil engineer ano tanggalon man ninyo ang katungod nato as civil engineers to sign an architectural plan. So further, if you go to section 308, napagyud. This code shall engage the services of a duly licensed architect or civil engineer, undertake the full-time inspection and supervision of the construction, and such architect or civil engineer may or may not be the same architect or civil engineer who is responsible for the design of the building. So, if ang inspection can be done by either an architect or civil engineer, and the design can be done either by a civil engineer or architect, so that means that the law is crystal clear that a civil engineer can really practice architecture job in the Philippines. So, kana karon ang gina-debate pa kay when these architects created their own law on the practice of architecture, naka-state mo go dito gi-specify kung unsa ang ilang mga kanang sites and type of structures na pwede i-design. And it created confusion because one part there says that architects can sign and seal buildings. Buildings lang daan is very much diverse. So kung i-claim unta sa architect na balik tanan buildings, but in this law, all buildings can be signed by civil engineers. So but pasabot di ay, pwede ta mo practice of architecture. Okay? Basta building. Okay? Take note, basta building. Pwede kita mo practice kay mo'y nasa law. And sa architects lang, they have a list of special structures that they can only sign. So may example ana. They can sign and design theaters. Okay, technically that's not a building that we do every day as a civil engineer. Theater, architect din na siya. Coliseum, architect din na siya. If for example, parks, pwede na siya sa architects, but karon debatable na with other professions. So this created major rift in the country, especially that the practice is so much into money. Okay, you get paid for signing and you get paid for approving a plan and even implementing it, diba? And in this caricature, you see really that there's really a rift between an architect who holds a pencil and an engineer who knows the calculation. But in some other places, they use this as an opportunity to really practice and create a healthy environment between the two professions. So, based on experience, sa ako, when a client wants me to design a one-story building, maskin pa og lapad na siya, and maskin pa ga-occupy na 1 hectare, a civil engineer can sign the architectural plans. Okay? Kaya 1 story man. Pero mo 2 story na ganina, consult an architect. Why? The spacing manggod is nearing the or kanang ma-shift nimo siya padulong sa minimum ng mga requirements. Kaya kung lapad kay siya, layo siya sa minimum, like ang door could be wider. Pero pag imo nang ito story, mapugos manggod ka to kanang imong gamyan ang door or imong buban ang ceiling. So that requires the expertise of an architect. Kaya para dili kaayo siya gamay tanawon or dili ba siya ngit-ngit tanawon. So munang nanay architect. But generally all over the country, kung 1 story nga balay, pwede gid mo sign ang civil engineer sa architectural plans. That's why later you can prepare the architectural plans by yourselves. But pag dagko na tag-as, ihatag sa architect kay para wala na i-rift nga parehani. And kung napoy special structures, as kita civil engineers, kung dili na to kaya i-design, dili na lang ta magpa kanang magpaluma-luma, kanang karong ingnon nga kaya na to. For example, theater. We don't have the knowledge to design a theater. Wala ta kabalo unsay lighting, unsay spacing, mo sana mo adto ang kanang mag prepare daan kanang mga gitawag na makeup room. Wala man tayo na nga knowledge, wala man nato nag-design. But architects, they study that. They have one subject for that. And for us, building design is only one subject. Sa ilaha, that's 2 to 3 subjects in a semester. So, murag para lugar di na sila sige pangaway sa ato. So, create that kanang sort of boundary nga basta specialized structures, sila ipa-design, sila ipa-approve. You can insert your comments and suggestions but put it at the minimum para nga dili kayo tang mag-conflict. And to clarify that thing, kisa may mag-sciencer sa each of the plans. This is a list of the laws that you can use as reference. So, in the Philippines, the fundamental law of the land is the Constitution. So, unless the Constitution is changed through charter change or constitutional convention, then we have to refer to a new general law. Next, laws are have hierarchy. The majority is NBCP based. So, PD 1096 man maskin pa og we hate the president at that time because it's a law, it's a law. So, Presidential Decree number 1096 will be the basis for all the laws that we use for design. So, take note, PD 1096 at gamitan na. There are then special laws. What are these special laws? RA 9266, this is for the practice of architecture in 2004. RA 9514, this is the Fire Code of the Philippines. And BP 344, which is the 83 law on the access for the disabled. These are just examples of specialized laws that you use for design. And then you also have IRR. These are executive orders and administrative orders. So, unsa man ang mas powerful, it's really the Constitution. Pero ang Constitution, wala may stipulate nga design requirements. So, that's why there's a law created for that, PD 1096. And as the years progress, na may mga special cases nga itong nakakita. Like now, COVID-19. After COVID-19, you should expect a law for spacing requirements for housing and for specialized structures like hospitals na anay button nga law for that. Or even the Green Building Code of the Philippines. That was an emerging trend of turning buildings energy efficient. So there was a law for that. Namutong naay bago. And then you refer to guidelines and standards and manuals of procedure. So, kaning hierarchy daan of laws highlighted who would sign and who can approve each of the plans. So, for each plans, as listed here, should be attributed and you pay respect to these professionals when you prepare them. But take note, when you prepare, any draftsman or engineer can do that. But when it has to be approved, signed, sealed, and inspected, you consult the following professionals. So for geodetic plans or lot description, go to a registered geodetic engineer. Why do I stipulate here registered? A graduate of BS Geodetic Engineering is basically a geodetic engineer. Okay? Basta naka-diploma, you are an engineer. You're just not registered. So only those who are registered, who has the seal, who has the PRC license, can sign and seal the document. Okay? So only RGEs can do that. For site development plans, for houses na siya and general commercial buildings, anyway, later we'll discuss the types of these buildings. A civil engineer or architect can sign that. Okay? Okay. Part man na siya sa katong loophole sa law nga na ay architect or civil. That is part of the building. So site development plan can be signed by both professions. Architectural plan. We can sign it together with an architect. But take note that when we sign this document, if you're having a client na 2-story or higher, consult an architect for the spacing requirements. Architectural plan is civil engineer or structural engineer. Actually, nanay gamay nga rift ani kay namanggoy uban civil engineer nga kanang practice of structural. Pero sa Philippines, wala manggoy law against that. Ang naa lang kay kanang naati classification sa civil engineers. And para matawag kag structural engineer, dapat na kay membership sa organization, which is the Association of Structural Engineers in the Philippines. Ikaduha na kay experience. And experience in the Philippines comes in two forms. First is construction experience. So kung enough na mo experience structural, ang sigaw design of structural maski wala ka kaskwela, verified and valid na siya. Pwede na ka maka-design. Ikaduha, kung eskwela kag masteral, na ang imuhang major or thesis baka structural, matawag ang structural engineer pag human. And then higher studies pa like trainings and PhD degree. So nag-eskwela ka for another 3 years. So na kay PhD or Doctor of Engineering, so matawag ka structural engineer. So asa lugar ana ang pinaka-simple nga path? Syempre magmasteral. So eskwela ka 2 years, tudluan mo ka sa concepts dito, the different limitations on your practice. So, pag after 2 years, pwede na ka ma-structural engineer. So, mulugar na ang pinaka-easy way around karon. Unang, daghan ka pang eskwela, daghan ka pang itaw structural engineering field. Pero kung 3 to 5 years na experience na sikag design o plano, pwede naman matawag ka mag-apply structural engineer. Okay. Sa Philippines, manggod, ang mag-approve sa plano, ang LGU. So ang Cagayan lahi na sa og approving requirements sa Iligan. So kung mag-practice ka, pwede ra ka buadto Iligan Cagayan, pero take note ang mo approve dili pareha nga tao. So sa Iligan dili pa kayo stricto, sa Cagayan stricto na. So dili ka basta-basta ka-sign sa Cagayan, dapat gid na kay full computation ay nila i-approve. Next, plumbing plan. Ang pwede is master plumber or sanitary engineer or sanitation engineer. Master plumber only takes an exam. So kita, pag-graduate na to, or maski eskwela pa ta, pwede na ta, basta mahuman lang mo hydraulics pwede na ta mo take ang exam sa master plumber. Just take note, pwede na siya. Sa sanitation engineer, this is another field. And ang difference lang din sa duha kay master plumbers are for residential structures and commercial buildings. Ang sanitation engineer for city scale like wastewater treatment or kanang dengue control structures. So sanitation engineer na siya. And sa Cagayan wala pa ispilhan para ani. Pero gasugod na ang USTP o buhat ana ang kurso. Sa Xavier, we are interested to offer that. It's just that wala tayo faculty members who can teach sanitation engineer. But soon, maybe, naana na siya. Next, electrical plan. Take note, it's professional electrical engineer. So, lahi na siya sa Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. So, ang PEE, pag-graduate nimo og kanang electrical engineering, mo take man sila exam. Ang kanang ilang exam kay REE, Registered Electrical Engineer. Dili pa na sila makapirma og balay. Okay? Muna nakalisan silang kurso. So, it takes 5 to 10 years pa dayon, experience, studies. So, mag-learn na sila, mag-present na sila sa ilang work, mura sila ga-defense, tawagon din sila o professional electrical engineer. So, it takes 5 to 10 years. So, in Cagayan, only a few lang ang PEE. And ang naay mga PEE, ang naibaw anong pinakadaghan na sa XU. Okay. Tulo ka faculty member nila dira, PEE. So, kung naay magpa-sign og kanang electrical sa balay, sa Xavier yun sila gadto. Kaya naraman dira, one-stop shop ba in second floor. Nara di tanan professionals. 7 is mechanical plan. Same gyapon sa electrical engineering, dili ka makapirma kung graduate lang ka og mechanical engineering. So, you study the BSME nga course, you graduate, take the exam, you will be called a registered mechanical engineer. You further make a study, experience, and then you defend your work, you will be called a professional mechanical engineer. Sa ME department, tulo dira pod ang mechanical na PME. So, sila ang makapirma pag kinahanglan og pump ang balay pareha ng fire extinguisher at dili fire extinguisher kanang sprinkler system na may pump, so sila pwede mo pirma. Air conditioning unit, sila mo pirma. Elevator, sila mo pirma. Next, electronics plan. Same gyapon, graduate of BS-ECE, dili makapirma. Mo-take sa siya exam, hindi ba? Duha ilang exam, ECE o ECT. Ang ECE lang exam ang required para maka-PEE ka. So, kanang mag-experience ka mag-further studies, matawag din kag professional electronics engineer. So, actually, sa tulo ka kanang kaning engineer, kani sila gitawag man nato ni power engineering in general. So, kani silang tulo, pareha sila og law nga naay professionalization. Si civil engineering lang ang naglahi together with sanitation, geodetic, and isa, computer engineering. Even si computer engineering, wala may lisensya. Pag-graduate nimo, engineer naman ka. So, si civil engineer, because specialized ang iyahang pamaagi, dili siya professionalization. So, mag-further studies lang ka para maka-practice ka ani nga specific na field. Pero sa kanang power engineering, ilaha man gud kay mas kanang controlled. So, dili ka basta-basta makapirma. So, dapat ka na experience. Next, specifications. It's a document containing the requirements of the building. Diba? It's a civil engineer or architect. Pwede ta. Except for details, so kung nakay details on the wiring, naay part dito nga mo pirma ang electrical. Kung nakay details about elevator, nga unsa nga brand, unsa ka usog, ang dagan, etc., mo pirma dapat ang PME anak. Okay? And for other projects, subdivision site development plan, kani siya, environmental planner, pwede ani, dili na pwede mag-apil-apil ang architect. So dagan na nga instances nga napaso ang architect pud ani nga subdivision, like again, nagigapabot og subdivision. Nakabutang mong sa kanang codes sa Cagayan nga dili ka-prepare ang architect ana, masin pag drawing ng architect, i-approve ginag environmental planner. So, pero may sila kapasok pagsulod sa approving body. So, dapat ENP na ginamo pirman. As-built plan, kanang inyong gibuhat karon or kamulo pang ginabuhat dira, is a civil engineer or architect's job. Pero generally, kay mahal man ang architect, 5,000 man lang minimum, dito na sila civil engineer kay bire, kuan katapat. So, pwede rin na. Roads, klaro gina siya civil engineer. Interior design sa spacing sa balay or structures or even for large-scale auditoriums, interior designer na siya. Parks and open spaces, environmental planner or architect. Anong duha? Pag static ang imong apas, it's an architect. Pero pag environmental laws ang imong katapat, kay nga no, environmental laws man. Ang environmental planner man good, we think like, sakto ba ning pag-position ni architect sa iyahang part dire? Kay asa man padulong ang tubig. Ang hangin, unsa may effect ani kay environmental ben ang concern. Ang traffic, kung ibutang nimo ning imong part dire, unsa may hitabo sa traffic impact ana. So dili na kaya iting sa architect. So ang ENP ang mo problema ana. Airports, ports, towers and bridges, civil engineer or structural engineer. So you see, in ani kadako ang coverage trabaho nato as civil engineers. And if you're willing to push on with your degree, muni ang kana lugar kung design ang imong direction, diri ka padulong. Okay? So, before I proceed, let me pause for entertaining your questions, if you may have some. Naabay questions? Anyone? May question?
Sir, na ako'y question, sir.
Yes, Neil.
Nang sa for other projects, lugar, sir, kana lugar mga aesthetic na designs for the projects, dili na needed yun ang architect, ana, sir?
Unsa man kanang na-approve na ang plano?
Like kanang sa airports, lugar, sir, di ba kayo na may uban design sa airports na ginakwa nila, ginapatsada nila ang interior. So, dili, okay na, dili na sila mo na sir, or murag pareha gyapon sa park, sir, na murag pwede sila mag-design pero ipa-approve pa dayon sa lain nga field.
Yes, oo. depende mo gud sa improvement sa kanang interior. Kung pananglitan ang apas kay efficiency, labi nag-airport, no? Kanang gusto ta nga paspas ang movement sa kanang tao, labi nag-international airport. Actually, transportation engineer ang exact na mo trabaho ana. Si Mambel gid na kay mag-ihap man na sa Mambel pila ka tawo mo agi. Iring tan-awon ang congestion. So pag inana nga aspect spacing, Mambel. So transportation engineer. Pero imong apas kay kana bitawng nay attraction na kay kanang way of kanang encouraging your kanang mga nalimot mo ko sa term sa kan sa mga tao kibali ba nga mo sakay eroplano or mo transit from one place to the other, architect may consult. Okay, like sa Singapore, they have attractions inside their airport. Architect may need think adto nga, okay, we need an indoor park, we need a movie area. Okay, behavior of people when they are not doing something is very erratic, di ba? Ikaw mo gani karon nga naras ninyong balay erratic yung behavior. Kung saan na lang travel ka, you have a 12-hour flight and then you have a 3-hour layover. So architect ang nag-think how you can utilize the 3 hours. Pero og ang apas po nimo kay lighting, uban airports are too dim. Dayon na amang spaces ni dili maapas sa sunlight, you need to consult an electrical engineer. So you see, in every aspect of the design nga naa kay specific question, you consult these persons and you gather them together to make the design. Okay? So each will have a specific plan, sign and prepare and seal. And kung ikaw ang main project engineer adto, you need to consult all of these professions.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Other questions?
Sir, na ko'y question.
Yes.
Kung mag-kuan, sir, ba tinod ba, sir, na if mag-proceed ka engineering to architecture is it takes 5 years gyapon, unlike architect ka daan tapos to engineering kay I think 2 years man to akong nadunggan. Tinod na, sir, nana?
Tinuod nga dili pareha og years, pero dili ko matuo nga 2 years ang architect para mo may mong civil engineer. I doubt kay maglisod man sila sa structural design.
Pero
So,
usually, sir, kay mas dugay ang engineering to architecture.
Mas dugay ang engineering to architect. Why? Sa law manggod sa architects, RA 9266, it requires that before you can be an architect, you do internship. And their internship is right after graduation. So, dili siya part sa imong eskwelahan. So, maski pag nahuman mo ang course requirement sa architecture, tapos engineer ka daan, in 2 to 3 years, it will take 1.5 year, take note na 1.5 years to finish an internship. Naman sa ilang law. So, imo na siyang i-comply. Then, kanang internship should be under an architect. So, kung si architect, dili ganahan sa imo during your internship, mag-ambak-ambak kag architectural firm. So, pag naa kay na nga practice, nga internship pa, survival of the fittest gid na kay kung internship di man pasabot nga na kay sweldo. So munang daghan ka ay longer ang span para nga makakuha lang lisensya sa architecture. So it takes 1.5 years without pay ang uban underpaid, and then you need to present na kanang imuhang murag logbook and nag-report ka ni nag-duty ka to the architecture board. So munang lisod ilaha. Murag manghod na sila sa doktor. Kay 7 years ba? Kung nag-start ka, this is for the 2008 curriculum ha. Kay 5 years ng architecture, 1.5 year ang internship, tapos half year ang review. Okay? So di ba ka-review ang wala internship. So 7 years na siya. Pero civil engineer ka, it takes only 5.5. Kaya pag-graduate nimo, then you take the board exam. Pwede gani nag-take kag May, so 2 months na lang. So naragid sa 5 years. Pero sa bago karon nga curriculum, 4 years naman ni siya. So sa architecture na shorten, dili na siya 7.5 but 6.5. So if you think about it, if you want to pursue an architecture's to be an architect rather, not to be kanang just an architecture student to be an architect, it's an opportunity now. Kaya shorter naman. And most of the courses are flexible. Dili pareha na una nga off-sem. Karon, it can be offered every semester. So, you can really make a leverage if you ever target later nga mag-architect mo. In the Philippines, you can do that by taking the architecture undergraduate studies. But na po yung other shortcut, ana, in case you're interested, ha? Civil engineer ka dire, and then, you go to other countries, take their masteral program. 2 years lang. So, naiuban schools nga ang ilang architecture ug civil engineering kay one school. So, butik kag 2 years nga masteral, usually masters in architecture, dawaton man ta, kay naman tay basic knowledge on that. Dayon pag mahuman ka, mutik ka sa ilang licensure exam. So, muna gabaton sa uban nga ipadala ang anak sa US dito ipa-study masteral. Mutik din sila board exam dito. Pag take nila board exam, balik sila Pilipinas, i-acknowledge mo to. So, shorter. Pero, kuan lugar, na lang kay initial investment na dapat i-prepare. So, daga nagbuhat og inaana. Nag-atog Europe, nag-atog Singapore, dito na yung eskwela, balik Pilipinas, architect na sila.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
By other questions? Hello, napabay pangutana? Okay, so it seems mawala na yung pangutana, so let me proceed to the next part. So, let's talk about types of construction. Okay, this is relevant when we decide first payment. Ato magiging istoryahan ang payment later. Second, what will be the spacing requirements for every type? So, NBCP has at least 5 types. Type 1 is for wood construction. Okay, so the structural elements may be of any material permitted by this code, but generally it's wood. So allowed pa na siya ang wood. But there's a difference between wood and kanang coconut. Coconut is technically not a wood, but lumber. Coconut is a palm tree, okay? And it doesn't really pass the standard for major construction. So muna nga ginagamit lang siya karon for scaffoldings, support lang sa structure. Pero sa karaan nga mga balay, kay walay lain source of lumber, coconut ang gigamit. And if you ask me, sir, pasar na siya sa standard? In terms of strength, no. Pero you have no other choice. So munang ang code, yan na lang gi-appeal sa iyang coverage nga it is a type 1 building. Type 2 are all wood, but with protective fire-resistant material. At least 1 or 5 fire-resistive throughout. So, pasabot ani. This is a type of wood where it's treated with a chemical, with proper drying, such that kung ma-expose siya sa kalayo, 1 hour, kaya siya masunog. So, there is that type 2 for that structure. Type 3, which muni atong i-design sa inyong final project, shall be of masonry and wood construction. What is this? Masonry is different from concrete. Masonry is a mixture of sand, cement, and water. Okay? Walay coarse aggregate. That is masonry. So muna nasa walling na to. Sa ato ang CHB kanang concrete hollow block. So ang wall na to is masonry. But the strength of the material comes from the post. So atong mga poste, atong mga beam na wood. Okay? So that's type 3. And then structural elements may be of any other material permitted by the code. So pwede din na siya nga you have a combination of steel and wood and reinforced concrete. So tulo din sila kaklase. So in that case, it is a type 3 or type 4 nga building. Let's go to type 4. Sa type 4 lang, shall be of steel, iron, concrete, and masonry. Walay wood. Okay? So type 4 na siya. Pero if you have wood combination, mabilong din siya sa type 3. Pero og purely steel, iron, concrete, masonry, type 4 na siya. Unsa example sa type 4? Majority sa mga warehouse, type 4 na siya. Kay steel ug iron man. Pero mga balay karon, nanay uban nga na may steel ug iron. Labi na pinaspasa ang construction. Kay sayon magud butang ang steel ug iron. Either you weld it or magamit kag bolt. So munang i-assemble na lang siya type 4. Last is type 5. Shall be fire resistive and this shall have steel, iron, concrete, or masonry construction, but with wall and ceilings nga permanent. So side ka different ani sa 4. Ang 4 kay dili kaayo siya fire resistant. Ang kaning 5 kay di gid siya masunog maskin unsaon. So unsa may example sa type 5 kanang bangko. So banks, they have this kanang vault, di ba? Na steel, iron, and concrete. That's a type 5. Okay? So kung gi-separate nimo na sa imuhang main structure, then type 5 na siya. Unsa pa other example? Bunker. Kung imuhang area kay very prone to kanang armed conflict, kailangan gid mo preparahag machine gun, type 5 na siya nga building. So in one instance, I had a client nga gusto niya ang iya daw dingding dili gid daw kuno malahusan og bala kung in kaso nga na ay muduol or nay magkabikil sa iyaha. So yun po siya, I wanted to look fancy. So yun ko nga, syempre sir, dili na pwede nga concrete hollow block. So among gigamit, nag-import me og red brick from Valencia. Okay? Katong brick nga ginasluto, gidala na mo to his place. And then gi-build na mo to from floor to ceiling brick. So that is a very old na style of construction. That's 1800s pa nga design construction. But ang brick manggod is very sturdy. Okay? Mas gahi na siya kumpara sa kanang CHB. So that's a type 5 building. Fire resistive kay giluto gud na siya daan so wala ni pwede masunog ana. So type 5 na siya. Later in your designs, you can play around with type 3, 4, or 5. Choose lang diri kung ano sa inyong main material. And you need to specify that kay magbuhat man ta og kanang mini or dummy nga kanang building permit. So specify ninyo either 3, 4, 5. For types 1 and 2, wala kaayo tayo buhaton ani unless inyong buhaton kay nipa house or waiting shed. So nara na siya sa type 1 or type 2. Next, types of dwellings. So NBCP nag-specify sa type of dwellings. Na group A to J. Group A are residential dwellings. So group A is an example like this one, a single detached house. Pag we say detached, wala siya nasumpay sa other structure. Okay? And this is a 2-story house where one side is a firewall. That is a group A na dwelling. Meaning, isa ka pamilya, isa ka balay. Wala siya nasumpay sa other. That's group A. Group B are those that are including boarding or lodging houses, hotels, apartments, row houses like in the picture, kanang sa subdivision, nga nakasumpay, but firewall lang ang pagitan, monasteries and other similar building with accommodations of more than 10 persons, like sa resort, group B na siya. Most hotels, group B na siya. Kung naay housing ang school, like Loyola House, group B po na siya. Because there are more residents in that structure or building. Okay? So, ang naka-different lang, basta isolated group A. Basta naka-sumpay group B. Next, group C, education and recreation. These are for school or daycare purposes, assemblage for instruction, education. So, convention center is one. School, kanang classroom na to, that is for education and recreation. And training centers. So, kung imuhang kanang company na siya own training center, katong yung training center building or floor will have a different classification. Group C na siya mabilong. So, as shown in this picture is different na sila of spacing requirements. Okay? Kay pag housing, kanang you really maximize the the freedom to see the other side. So muna nga limited lang ang mabuhatag firewall basta group A. Pero group B, because you're using it as a common nga kanang space, pwede ra nga 3 sides i-firewall or even 2 sides i-firewall. Okay? Or munang condo, isa ra gid ka side ang naibintana. Okay? Or 2 sides kung naka sa corner pero mahal. And group D, institutional. Kasama ni sila. Later, basta ipa-design mo, mental hospital. Division 2, nursery. Division 3, which is a nursing home or ambulatory patients. Saan ang ambulatory? These are for patients which has requirements for kanang proper respiration. Ambulatory. Okay? Sige. I think we can pause for 5 minutes before we proceed to the next topic or the next contents of the lesson. So 5 minutes lang a break, whether mag-CR break mo or you get something for your stomach. Okay? So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, everyone, I hope you're back. Hello.
Sir.
Hello.
Sir.
Sir, sir.
Sige. Sige, moving on. So, muna ang first four groups of shall we say as building types based on their uses. So primarily dili ni siya based on spacing but based on uses. So kung asa siya gigamit, so naa siya group A, B, C, or D. And further ang D naa siya 3 divisions, especially for kanang hospital and treatment uses. So part pod sa kanang requirement ani kay basta hospitals, you treat all individuals not the same. So compared sa school nga, ang school pwede nga ang atong railway or atong walkways kanang wala man na siya handles, wala sab na siya kanang requirements for lighting and kanang colors. So compared sa hospitals, naagi real sa side ang hospital, naagyoy kanang different colors ang floor o ang wall para ma-distinguish nimo kay basig nalipong ka. So muna main difference. Kung balay sa matingalan mo pwede ra raw, pwede ra bare kay residential man na siya nga usage. So if you ever need to check asa ni siya nga source, go to the NBCP and check section 701. This is for building occupancy classifications. Next, if you need to classify further na apply from group E to J. Now group E is for business and mercantile. So ang example sa business kay gas station, different na siya requirement. So mas dako actually ang kanang businesses and mercantile. So naay gasoline nga classification, naay wholesale or retail like sa SM store, ma-notice ninyo luag. Okay? Ayaw lang na sa Gaisano, pagsak na na. Sa SM, luag yun siya. So, from floor to ceiling na requirement, from the aisles, from the entrance and the exits, so muna requirement. Division 3 are aircraft hangars or parking garage. So, like sa airport, matingala mo nga nung daho kayang door nga allowed, okay, that is for Division 3. So, generally for Group E, because you don't just accommodate individuals or kanang pedestrians, you also accommodate kanang vehicles and other kanang machines like sa hangars, helicopter, aeroplano, or comport, barko. So nana sila sa group E. Group F kay industrial. So example sa group F is kaning storage, creameries, factories, workshops, incombustible materials. So kung naka sa industrial design, dagan ka kadato pud sa industrial design like sa PVDEC kamo adto. Ako'y batch nga kanang dato na kay siya karon kay naka-kliyente siya o kaning singalan ani industrial nga German nga naadapit sa PVDEC. So siya ang nag-design, siya ang nag-interpret sa mga kanang design requirements from Germany tapos iyang gi-Philippinize kay nana magina sila kanang nasa preferred design sa kawas dalo nila dire tapos ipa-interpret nila sa Pinoy. So dato na siya. Okay? So kanang group F na siya. So kung if ever you consider that mag-sacrifice lagi inyong aesthetic nga mga dreams kay pag industrial it's all metal, all cement, all concrete. Okay? Group G, storage and hazardous occupancies. So na division 1 storing like this one kanang storage using kanang singalan ani warehouse. Kana pong style sa City Hardware, that is actually group G. Okay, high ceiling, minimal ventilation, high kayang lighting and good airspace for storage purposes. So group G na siya na belong. And die 4 divisions from different hazards kay namagoy toxic materials nga dapat i-isolate. So sa environmental engineering mo niyo mong gastadihan nga how do you store and dispose hazardous elements? For example, muriatic acid needs to be stored separately with combustible materials. Kay muriatic acid, when exposed to fire, can be toxic. It can release the sulfurs, so dili din ka ginhawa. So muna nga ang civil o environmental ka work together ana. Even sa waste disposal, okay, that's a requirement. Pag nakakaibig na hazardous storage facility, you need to dedicate one space as a material recovery facility. So, kuhanin mo dira, temporarily store ang waste before siya i-collect, or if ever naka-subcontractor to get that waste and put it somewhere. So, nana siya sa group G ng kanang classification. Repair garages are also examples, aircraft repair hangars. So, kana kung itawag na to nga singalan ganyan niya. Kana bitong car wash facility, it can be classified as group G. That's why it has a very high ceiling and then portions na pwede musaka ang sakyanan, then na ay i-fix ang mechanicals from the bottom. So, pwede na siya. Group H, kay assembly group. Say assembly group. This can be in the form of a covered court. So, assembly other than group I. So, ang I na to is this one. Assembly with covered areas. So, pag closed siya, group I. Pero pag open siya, well, group H na siya mabilong. Okay? So, ang difference lang sa I o H kay ang covering. Okay? Pag na-cover, you will consult a structural engineer. Pero open lang siya, like katong old na theaters nga, wala kay atop, wala kay wall, just benches. You don't need a structural engineer to do that. Simple naman ang design. So sa group I, munang naatay covered courts, gymnasiums, theaters. Group I na siya nabilong. And ang requirement is it should have an occupancy load of 1,000 persons or more. Less than 1,000, pwede rin na siya ma-classify as group B or even kaning direo. If it's for residential or for educational, so pwede po siya group C. Pero dinaghan na, like Araneta Coliseum, so group I na gina siya. Or kanang, ano na yung isa? MOA Arena, that's already group I. And then, pa isa. If you're using it for a convention center nga less than 1,000, so group C to siya mabilong. Pero kung dako na kaayo, like si SMX Convention Center, na siya sa group I. Group J, accessory occupancies. So for example, nakay own garage for your Ferrari, that is group J. Or naakay storage facility outside of your house. So sa bata pa ko, gabuhat ginang papaginani maskin pa og scrap material na siya. That's actually group J. It's where all those things nga dili na ginagamit sa balay dito ibutang, no? And ganahanin ko magdula dito, kaya narito tanan ako nga gusto nga mga kanang maski pa mga screw na siya ron sa nga i-assemble, i-weld dayon, so na siya sa group J. Kana pong atong mga gitawag na tong workshops can be classified as group J. Apart from that, fences. So, civil engineers can also sign a fence, no? Basig makuan mo, coral raman na. Uy, atika, coral ra, pero milyon. So, coral, for example, sa Xavier Estates, si Engineer Apor nag-design na, hindi na siya basta-basta. Or if you go to Robinson's Land sa taas, milyon to, dili to siya basta-basta nga design. So, kung milyon, mo charge kag 10%, diba, you get also that income. Okay. You cannot just design a fence. It should be strong enough to sustain the loads of the soil and also the elements. So kung mo baha, bulinog, i-design po mo ng wall, no? Ng atong fence. So part na siya group J. And also, the specialized structure called a water tank tower. So sa water resources engineering, i-discuss nato ni nga kanang how should you design the height. Kaya ang pressure sa pipes, included man na ana nga computation din. Ang loading po din ana, anong 4 lang ka post, anong 3, or even kanang tower sa dito. That's group J. Those are accessory occupancies. So, muna nga, grabe gid ka dako ang coverage na to as civil engineers, no? So, muna nga, medyo gasilos na sina po ng architects na both will lang balaod na RA 9266, which we will discuss in a different session. Next, location of property. So now that you know what will be the classification of the structure that you need to design, you also need to decide if the location is good, proper, and allowed. So Section 704 of NBCP states that no building shall be constructed unless it adjoins or has direct access to a public space, yard, street, or on at least one of its sides. So kung nakaisilingan yung gikuralan imong passageway, makasuhan na siya. According to the building code, no building shall be constructed. So imong balay, kung nag-exist na siya dira, gi-block sa silingan, that is against the civil code pod. Nga nganong gi-block nimo siya kay everyone should have the right to passage. Okay? So kung silingan kakuralon, bawal na siya. Dapat butang nga gate kay para na kay temporary passage. Kung mag-design pud kag balay, kung imong silingan dili ka pasudlon sa imong lote, wa gid ka kagawas, bawal pud na siya. So dapat one of your neighbors should accommodate a space for you to kanang walk. Pero the requirement of the code lang is walk. So you cannot demand your silingan to offer you passage for your vehicle. Okay? In that case, a vehicle that's already luxurious, you need to purchase that lot. Okay? Pero pag passage lang, maigo lang isa ka tao, you are allowed by law. Mo-demand ka na. So munang in some cases nga, maski pag nidako kay nga kanang gaisano nga area, nagi na siya gamay nga pathway sa gilid. Like dito sa bulwa, nagi gamay nga dingding dito nga dito kaagi ang tao. So that's allowed and mandated by law. Another requirement that for this purpose, eaves over required windows shall not be less than 750 meters from the side and the rear property lines. So, kasi pasabot ana. Pag naa kay bintana, nga naa magine-cover ang bintana no sa taas, kanang sa atop ba? Okay, syempre kung bintana lang, nakay dito lang nga bintana, kinahanglan mi man ako virag atop. The covering sa atop should be not less than 750 millimeters or 0.75 meters. So dili pod pwede nga sa imong property line, imong hutdon og kuha na siya, butangan ni nimo bintana, bawal na siya. Okay? So kung nakay firewall gani, bawal na siya bangagan. Bawal butangan bintana ang firewall. Okay? Okay, that is for purposes of fire safety. And second, that actually prevents your neighbor from accessing first view, second access, third air. So basic mo sa civil code nga dapat ihatag nimo na sa any citizen of the Philippines. So pag imo na siyang gi-obstruct, gibutangan nimo wall with a window, makasuhan ka. So dapat imo i-move by 0.75 meters. Unless kung nag-firewall ka, imo dapat firewall walay bangag. Okay? And it should be kanang adjoin at least 3. Kung rectangular lugar imong lote like this in this picture, 3 parts of that can be covered with a firewall, but at least one side should have access. So kung na kay lote, for example, kaning sa ubos, okay, this is a basic example. Ayaw sa ng corner lot sa taas, okay, that's difficult. Kaning ubos. So, you will have a lot and each side will have a distance. The distance from one of your walls to the next neighbor should be 4 meters. So, pasabot ana, sir. Na kay dingding sa silingan, na po di mong dingding, ang distansya ana in total should be 4 meters. Your property line should be located in the middle. So, meaning, from your property line to your wall should be 2 meters. And sa silingan po nimo, from his or her property line to his wall should be 2 meters. Okay? That's the minimum allowed by law. Unless nagbuhat kag firewall, then you have to build it high for your fire protection. Pero kung wala kay firewall, it should be, your wall should be away 2 meters from your property line and 4 meters away from your neighbor's wall. Okay? And divitable ng wall. The wall should be for areas that are habitable. So kung nagbuhat siya wall para sa garage, dili na cover dire. Hindi man habitable ang garage. 2 meters pod away from waiting shed, di man na habitable. Kaya wala may natulog dira sa waiting shed. So pwede ra tong waiting shed mo occupy gid siya sa property line. Pero pag wall sa kitchen, walls sa bedroom, walls sa living room, it should be 2 meters from the property line and 4 meters from the next wall of the neighbor. Okay? So, kinsa may makashare karon og naaba ka mo'y property dira or inyong balay nga think ninyo dili na siya covered sa 2 meters. Anyone who can share? Labi na ng mga subdivision, ngano man na sila nga ang ilahang wall to wall is 1 meter. Pwede ba na siya? Based from this law? Hello? Hello, anyone? Should I call someone? Nang leave na din ang uban pag magtawag ko na. How about Chubby? Are you there, Chubby?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Kindly describe how your spacing is implemented in your property. Ang wall ninyo o wall sa silingan, can you give an estimate kung isulod ba siya sa 4 meters?
Nag-firewall mo, good sir? So,
Ano?
wala yung 4 meters.
Kinsa ang nag-firewall? Kamo or ang silingan?
Kami, wag ang silingan.
Oh, so duha ka buk wall. Wala di mo nagsabot ba nga? Isa na lang?
Okay, aning natungan mo, good sir, sa Pikas na, sa Pikas.
So nasa duha ka sides. In your firewall, did you create a window?
Wala, sir, pero ang silingan na.
Unsa iyang window kanang ma-open or glass lang?
Ako ma-remember kay naatib bangag ganyan or grills for ventilation na ata ako ma-remember. Kaya mura man siya budiga good tapos balay sa taas.
Sige. Sa building code bawal unta na ay opening. O any opening is not allowed. Basta firewall. Okay? But in some cases, asa man ni siya? Sa first floor, sa second floor? Ang bangag.
Murag
First floor, kalabaw. Bawal yun unta.
Second floor ata. Di ko remember, sir. Wala ko gawas.
Okay. Ako lang ang ignanan, bawal na siya kay dapat man walay opening kay di ba kana nga opening ga move ay sani siya ga obstruct naman sa inyong property kay ang ilang voice mosulod man sa inyo if ever ni voice dito or naa ba kay air. So technically bawal na siya. Ang gabuhaton kasagaraan na sa mga owners kay pagpa-approve walay bangag sa katong sa plan. Pag-implement mangagan din nila. So actually dili na siya allowed ha. Pag firewall yun na siya. Pwede ka magbutang og si kana bitang mura bitaw siya crystal nga box nga mura siya og window pero technically light lang ang mosulod. Allowed na siya. Para retardant man sad na siya. Mura siya blocks nga gi-arrange nga glass tapos dili siya ma-open. That's allowed. So in some cases basta storage o kanang mga warehouses makita sab nato na. Pero napoy isa nga opening if ma-observe ninyo kanang mura siya brick nga naa siya pa-side nga opening for ventilation kana allowed kay you cannot see man good your neighbor. That's allowed. Okay? Pero og gi-grill lang siya nga puthaw, that's not allowed. Okay, makita man ning imong neighbor, okay? Sa civil code, they should provide privacy. So dili nimo makita ang silingan. Mo gina siya ang nasa atong balaod. So you can go away with it by designing some system nga naka-slant nga makasulod lang ang air pero di ka makita sa silingan, that's allowed. So muna siyang isa ka limitations po sa atong mga balaod. So when you design your house later, each side should have a minimum of 0.75 no basta window. But this is only for the side and rear property lines. Kasi pasabot ana, side is kani there is side yard. If I can show the pointer, kaning side yard and rear likod. So ang side o rear can have 0.75 meters from the kanang property line as long as ang kanang wall pud ana niya is not a firewall. So pwede na siya. Pero kung ang imuhang wall dire is for habitable zones, you really need to move it 2 meters. Okay? Okay. Kanang in kaso magsunog, in kaso og agian na og fire truck, di mo igo. So muna nga 2 meters gid ang allowed by law. Pero you can go as far as 0.75 as an eve. So kung ang imuhang atop na siya edge 0.75 ana from your window. Then ang wall po dayon 2 meters from the property line. So to demonstrate that, I think I have this one. Okay? So muna yung pasabot sa 0.75, no? Can everyone see the kanang illustrated version?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir.
Okay. So, the 2 meters is absolute ha. Per property line, 2 meters, this one. Wall to property line, 2 meters. And this from this wall to the next neighbor's wall should be another 2 meters para 4 siya in total. And your eve, so katong atop nga kung pasabot ganina, can extend as long as dili siya muubos sa 0.75. Okay? So kaning atop, dili pwede mo lapas ang edge sa atop sa silingan. Bawal po na siya. Dapat nara siya sa 0.75 from the property line. Okay? Minimum pag na, dili pwede 0.6. 0.75 gid mismo. Okay? So 2 meters dire then 0.75. Okay? So unta na sabta na siya. And kaning box by the way is the wall of the house. Mura ning permitted by the building code. Okay? So whether you have 1 hectare lot, ang basis gid na isang property line para makabuhat ng spacing requirement. Okay? Then sa front, the front is actually much more strict. Okay, sa front nato, the wall of that front house, labi habitable zone, living room for example, should be as far as 3 to 3.5 meters. Okay? So mas luag ang front. Kaya ang tawagan niya na kay yard. The yard should be for purposes of ventilation, for air, and for view. So bawal po na i-obstruct sa imong silingan imong front. Pag mo declare gani ka sa imong design nga kani akong front, bawal na siya i-block sa silingan butang og firewall sa pika side. Okay? Kay front man to nimo, you have that right nga makita nimo ang what's there. So it should be either the road, a waterway, or a forest. Munang allowed sa law. Okay? And by this, nga makabalo din ka asa ang imong spacing requirements, ilimit din sa building code ang allowable floor areas. Dili na din medyo gubot po ang computation. Okay, the allowable floor area for 1-story building and buildings over 1 story, so pasabot 2 story, shall not exceed the limits prescribed by the secretary. So grabe power ang secretary no si Villar, di ba? So ilang family grabe og power kay they can dictate the spacing requirements of all floors all over the country. It's not the president, it's the secretary of the Department of Public Works and Highways. So they have the right and the prescription on each occupancy groups and other types of construction. And for the purposes of this section, each portion of the building separated by 1 or more area separation walls may be considered a separate building provided that the area separation walls meets the requirements prescribed thereof by the secretary. So, in the original text in the NBCP, wala gibutang on the requirement for the area sa, for example, bedroom, for example, living room. Basta kay kanang follow lang ka sa easement requirements na 2 meters per side and 3 to 5 meters sa front. So, ikaw na rin bahala sa sulod kung gamay ba or dako ang kwarto. Pero, ang requirement po sa code kay you can kanang be creative on the dimensions sa sulod. Basta kay dili siya mulapas sa airspace requirement. So, unsa po ang airspace requirement? For school rooms, 3 cubic meters with 1 square meter of floor area per person. So, muna nga ang eskwelahan sa Xavier, ang imoging desk, naka-design na siya nga you have 1 square meter of floor area for you. You're paying for that. 1 square meter per class. So 1 square meter gina siya. So that's 1 by 1. 1 length, 1 width. So total 1 square meter. And 3 cubic meters of volume. So 1 by 1, the height of the floor should be 3. Okay? Muna yung gibahiran nga volume for schools. For workshop, factories, and offices, mas dagko. It's 12 cubic meters of airspace per person. So, pwede ra na ang 1 by 1, tapos high ceiling dayon. Pero normally, pag kanang offices, yung mas dako man na siya compared sa desk sa student. So, nakaka sa 2 by 2. So, pila man na? 4 Dani kay height ni 3 meters. So, mas dako siya. Dumurag duwa ka desk sa estudyante. That's for an office. Third, mas dako ang requirement for habitable rooms. 14 cubic meters of airspace per person. Kung say habitable rooms, ang bedroom ninyo is a habitable room. So, bot pasabot, each side of your room can be 2 meters. So, 2 by 2, that's 4, as long as the height compensates for the 14 cubic meter requirement for volume. So, lisod man guna una-una nga, daw og gamay ang room, high ang ceiling. Di man na pwedeng itasaka ni mo tanan. So, ang gabuhato na lang sa designers kay mo fix na lang ta sa 2 by 3 nga minimum requirement. Meaning, not one side should be less than 2 meters and the other side should not be less than 3 meters. Diba 2 times 3 is 6. Then from that 6 meter, if you get, for example, 2.4, busulod siya sa 14 or near 14 cubic meter na airspace requirement. So muna siya for bedrooms, do not go lower than 2 by 3. Okay? And the height should be at least 2.1 meters para musulod siya sa 14 cubic meter na requirement. Nakuha ba na siya? Hello? Nakuha na siya?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, your right as a Filipino citizen is to breathe air of 14 cubic meters for your rooms. So, if ever gamay kayo na, you could actually tell your mom and your dad nga, Mom, this is not kana allowed in the building code. Okay? So, muna siya ato ang requirement. For window openings, every room intended for any purpose or use not provided with artificial ventilation are herein specified in this code. So, you have the 14 cubic meter requirement for habitable rooms. Each of those rooms should be accommodated with a window, unless, of course, there's an air conditioning system. So, pwede ra mo bot og room nga walay window, basta na aircon. Pero, dili pwede nga, wala gid siya aircon. Okay? Kaya, unsa naman na, prisuhan? Hindi na pwede. So, for civilized people, one side should have a wall, wall with window, and the other parts should be without an opening. So, pwede ra nga 1 out of the 4 has a window, and then the other will have a door. Okay? But ang understanding sa code, kay the opening should only be the window. So, kung na ay door, dili na siya apil sa kwenta sa pila ang size sa window. So, the window openings should be followed, and kung wala kay window, aircon. Okay? And the illustrated version of the heights of a building are shown here. For example, you have a 14-meter dwelling, and this is classified as R1. R1 belongs to group A, meaning dwelling with single detached house. So, say pasabot ng single detached, wala na sumpay sa other structure. So, you can have 2 meters per side, so meaning 2 meters sa side o sa other side, and the length of that could be 10 meters ang balay. So, 10 plus 2 and 2 will be 14 meters. So, kung naka sa subdivision, muning gina-follow nila nga, na-adjud ka dapat 14 meters na minimum length. Unless socialized housing, pwede na siya ma-half, gamay na kaayo, pero i-compensate siya sa length sa pikas. Muna ang row houses, nipis, pero kanang layo siya sa kanang dalan. So, pwede na siya at 14 meter na requirement. Okay? So, you also need to follow that the eaves should be 0.75 from the property line. And also, there are requirements for kanang slopes. So, dili pwede nga too steep imong balay. It should be at least 3% ang slope. So, as shown here, muna siya. Pwede ra ka mag-slope gamay, but take note that the elevation should not be too much nga ma-jeopardize ang integrity sa structure. Next, this is for established grade elevation. What's the difference between this one and the other one? This one has a parapet. Okay, the parapet is an addendum to your existing size. So, pag muni imong property, dayon nabutang kag attic, that is a parapet. Okay, the parapet should be smaller than your original house. So, muna ginatawag sa penthouse, it's smaller than the original house. So, allowed na siya by law, and muni ang mga spacing requirements. It should be only 1 meter height. Kay pag mulapas kag 1 meter, considered na as room. So kung for storage purposes lang ang extension, or you have a design of your roof na kanang naa kay separate roof from your own house or main house, so patong-patong imong ato, that's a parapet. So allowed na siya, and inani lang ang design. Compared sa kaganiha, with a parapet, you can kanang you cannot make use of the eave. Kaya wala may extension ng ato. Kanang mga flat roof na design, inani na siya parapet. So ang limitation sa law, you should follow the 2 meters on each side, and also that the parapet should be at a height of 1 meter. Okay? Next, for setbacks. So, muna akong ipasabot kaganina nga, unsa man ang setback requirements. The easement is provided by the civil code, and it should be 4 meters. Okay? Pero the easement is the 2 meter. Okay? However, the setback is much more stricter. The setback should be that you should not occupy 2 meters from your property line to your outermost wall. So, kani ang strict. Pwede ragid ka nga kanang ang imong silingan nag-firewall, di ba? Tapos ikaw na 2 meters. So, allowed na siya. Or kamon duha nag-firewall. That's an easement requirement. But, kung nag-wall mong duha na dili firewall, setback is a much more stricter and stringent rule that it should be 4 meters from wall to wall. And the rule for measuring the distance should be from outermost face of the wall to the outermost. Dili center to center. It should be outer. So outer dire nga wall, outer pud sa tikas wall. So kung nag-tiles na ang silingan, na sulod niya sa 4 meters, so na 3.95 na lugar, dili na na-allowed. Dapat niya dili i-tile. Okay? Muna siya nga, ang kasagara wall, nga naa sa inani nga side, are bare. Okay, para dili kayo siya mo kanang occupy sa boundary sa pikas silingan. So, muna nga ang atong houses na itsura. You have that setback sa rear o sa side, and your house is quite isolated to other structures. Unless, of course, you're group B. Okay, sa group B, allowed man mag-firewall, tanan. So, muna itong huot. Pero for without firewalls, you should follow the 2 meter per side, and for the front, at least 3 to 3.5 meters. We'll discuss in the next lecture kung saan design ng 3 to 3.5. Okay? So, for higher structures pod, you can check the actually there is SketchUp file in eLearn where you can explore. I'll still have to upload it here sa number 4, but the SketchUp file actually looks like this one. Let me share my whole screen. You can open the file later. It's saved in a lower version man sub, so no worries lang ta sa ato ang version nga i-open. So this is the illustrated copy of the building code done in SketchUp. So pag high story na or multi-story nga building, maning requirements sa building code, you can actually zoom and check. So sa building code, basta taas na kayo, this is 2, 4, 6, 8 story. At the 8th story nga part, you need to decrease na the size. Kay each individual has the right of access and view to the road. Kung imo mo nang i-full vertical dira, basta nag-occupy ka sa kaning imo yung property line, gani, nabantayan ninyo, property line mo siya na-occupy. Pag musaka na kaana above 8 meters, you should slant it or taper it, muning mo gamay, to allow access to direct view of the road. Kaya pag imo ra na siyang i-vertical, pag tanaw sa kanang person, ang niya makita ang other side na sa building, dito na sa pikas. So, that actually restricts your view. So, pagka 8 story, mo taper na gid ang building. So, that's the secret behind buildings who are at 20 story nga nganong mo taper siya pag mo-occupy siya sa property line. Unless, of course, if your property line or your area is quite big and you want to move away daan by as much as 4 meters, so dili na ka mag-taper pag ingon ana. So, pag diri na ka nagsugod, aside, no need for tapering. Pero pag i-occupy niya yung property line na above 8 story, mag-taper din ka. Okay, that's a person's right to see the road. Okay? So, i-consider natin as atong designs na pasig mag-design mo later of doll house and tower, magino siya, dapat each occupant of that building will have a view of the road or whichever open area that is accessible. Pwede waterway, pwede forest. Sige.
Sir, another question, sir. How about the building without a Lux Hotel, sir?
Lux Hotel? Okay, and then?
Marag straight raman siya and then daghan kay siya floors.
Ay, yes. Gi-move away man siya sa iyang property line.
Okay, sir. Thank
Pero
you, sir.
iyang gi-occupy, di ba? Kabantay ka sa side kanang mabaklayan bito sa tao padulong sa tong ilang pool. Di ba luag kayo ang kanang
Yes,
pathway?
Yes.
Property line man na ni kuan ni Katkay.
Okay, sir.
So gihatag niya sa pedestrian. Kaya kung gi-occupy pa niya na, pag abot sa 8 story, mo taper na yung building. Pero nag-move away man siya daan, gigamit din niya as pedestrian walkway. So, pwede ra siya nga. Ang yan dimension from first floor above pareha.
Okay, sir.
Okay? So, nainana nga mga rules basta kanang dagko na kay nga mga land area. And that also explains why ang tag-as na kay nga building like sa Dubai or even sa Taiwan nga mo taper mo gamay ba sa taas kay kanang that's for the purposes of view but also napo na siya structural nga requirement para ana kay that actually concentrates the center of gravity in the middle para nga pag muhangin mo earthquake dili kaayo lihok imo ang structure. Okay, moving on. So, i-open lang yung SketchUp file para makita ninyo unsay mga basic requirements and how it is in illustrated version. Okay, nalang ko ipakita diri nga part. So, for your activities this week, basically mo start naman ta og buhat og inaning mga requirements. But we'll start with the site development plan with your location plans. And kanang perspective, ayaw gina siya i-think nga mo nang pinaka-first ni mga buhaton. You need to think of the block and the spacing first. Panipatang kanang rectangles and kanang property line boundaries. Ayaw sa niibuhat ang perspective. The perspective should be done last. Okay? Kay magbuhat lang kag space dira, then ibutan na to ang perspective on how the house will look like after you consider all the laws, codes, and requirements from the land. So, what I need from you for this week, kindly satisfy or comply the following. For your first laboratory exercise, there is a template that I need to upload, okay? And there's a little instructional video rather on how to convert your drawing plans into AutoCAD file and how you can place this in a template. So, how do templates look like? Ako lang pakita ng template ha. This is an example of a template. So, ako ning i-upload, then kanang naka-AutoCAD file na siya, you just need to change some things. So may i-change ani. First, you need to create your own company name or own brand name. Okay? Normally, architects will name their company to their name para sa yung timanan. Like si Architects Soriano. Soriano na siya. Architects and Associates. Or si Simanya. So, Gemma Simanya ang iyang name. So, you can be creative on that. Pwede, ngalan sa iyong girlfriend, ngalan sa iyong family, whichever. Basta kayo na may company name or brand name. Second, create a logo. What could the logo be? Pwede nga acronym sa imong name. For example, for me, ang first gigamit, JRV. But later, gitransition ko kay dako naman among coverage, itawag na mo VEA. Then later pa jud na widen na mong scope, VEAA. Kasi pasabot na. It's Valiente Engineers, Architects and Associates. Okay? So that's the company that we're running. Pero sa inyo, you can start with your acronym. For example, CB, Christian Baita, pwede na siya. CP, Carlo Potot. It depends. Kamu na bahala ko nun sa, basta kayo namoy company name. With the logo. And that logo will be used in your template. So, pakitanda mo balik sa template. In the lower left part here, you need to add the logo and your brand name. So, make sure nga, bufit lang siya sa space, kanina sa space sa ubos. So, kamu na bahala kung saan na siya magsigo. Third, generate a random PRC number. Okay? You start from 0133706. So, just add numbers above this kanang registration number to create your own random number. Okay? So, para lugar ma-feel ninyo nga sa sulat og numbers sa civil engineer. Next, create a random TIN number because when we sign, we need to pay taxes. So, start from 316990491. So, you can add up to this number. Pwede alis din ang first. Basta kayo na ang itsura niya in terms of digits. Fifth, generate a random PTR number. PTR is the local tax that we pay yearly sa CP or LGU. So, you can start from this number. So, take note nga, yun yung timan-an din yung numbers when you kanang submit the files later. 6, use your parents' names for the owner part. Okay? Kaya atong template na ni owner, so there is a lower part, you can actually indicate the owner. So, I want you to discuss with your parents sa nilang dream home or say, gusto niyo i-change sa inyong houses para nga kanang sila din ang mo perma for the owners. So, before you submit the work later, I need them to sign the document as the owner. 7, address. Use your own address, whether it is in the city or from the provinces, just use your own address. Okay? So, take note of these things sa inyong laboratory exercise number 1. So, though I collected this SketchUp file, you need to submit another file later with the template. So, that's a drawing and the spacing requirements, but I'll record another lecture na unsa may minimum requirements po sir sa kanang as-built plan. So, I'll show you that sample later. Number 2. For next week, we will discuss how you can position your lot using the easement, the setbacks, and the spacing requirements. So, as a requirement, until the weekend, kindly look for a land title, at least 200 square meters. Unsa ang land title, sir? It's sometimes called the TCT, Transfer Certificate of Title, kung napasa na ang lote sa kanang grandchildren or sa mga nabaligya ba kaha. So, TCT ang ngalan na. Or if wala pa gina-transfer ang lote nga pangalan sa inyo pang ancestor, Original Certificate of Title ang tawag na, OCT. So, kindly look for one land title, whether it's TCT or OCT, at least 200 square meters. Kaya dira mo mag-basic consider sa inyong designs. It's the 200 square meter. Sir, what if 1 hectare akong lote? Okay ra. Kaya wala man siya lapas sa minimum na 200. What if 10 hectares, sir? Okay ra gyapon. Basta kay wala siya giubos sa 200 square meter area. Okay? So prepare this thing. I know lisod na pangitaon. So you need to be creative in looking for that land title. Okay? Make sure that when you have that document, if it's not your own, kindly remove the name when you submit. Okay? Kaya pangitaon ako na next week. So, i-remove lang ang name sa owner sa left. And then, make sure nga nakay-copy yan. Okay? Kaya gamitin na to na siya for the next exercise. Nakuha to?
Yes, sir. Ay, sir, kaning number 1 exercise, sir, bakit to ning as-built plan nga among gi-make last week?
Yes, wala pa man to na to gi-collect nga naka-template na siya ba? Kana nakaingon na ani bitaw. Mag-drawing pa mo nakaingon na ani.
Okay, sir.
Na kato inyong drawing isulod na to dire. Pero tudloan pa ta mo sa laboratory. So na convert from SketchUp to AutoCAD. Kaya ang templates mong good are drawn in AutoCAD.
Okay, sir.
So, gato lang sa just make the other requirements. I know nga na uban dire nga na apod sila artistic qualities nga gusto sila ilang logo will really represent how they want their company logos to look like in the future. So, make use of that. Tapoy, ila ba ka days? 3 days until mag-Monday para nga maka-create og logo, the other numbers, and also look for the kanang land title. And from that land title, magsugod din tag drawing sa asa giday ninyo pwede i-situate ang inyong balay. Nakuha na siya?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ay,
Do you
sir,
have
na may
questions?
question, sir.
Yes.
Katong signature, sir, ba okay ra isig, sir?
Yes, pwede naman isig.
Okay, sir.
Kung saan siya nga isig imong pasabot?
Sa parents mo na ta, sir.
Okay. Last pa man to. Butangi lang sa ngalan.
Ay, okay,
Ayaw
sir.
lang sa ibutang ang kanang signature.
Of USEC Office of Civil Defense and Executive Director of NDRS.
Okay?
And I also see here the presence of Eugene Gonzalez.
Ay, sir, na question, sir.
Question?
Kanang sa AutoCAD, sir, hopefully okay ra ang student version to, sir.
Oh, pwede naman.
Sige, thank you, sir.
Kung sa may question. Napay pangutana?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Di ba, dili ba kailangan magbutang og parking lot nga na i-dimension nga 5 by 3, sir? Sa imong
Ayaw lang
plan,
sa,
sir.
kanang i-design mo na to ang balay ninyo later nga ang car park kay ma-occupy niya tong front yard nga dimension. So, the requirement mo good to use 5 by 4 or any other car park dimensions. Nakabase mo na siya sa usually subdivision ng mga balaod. Okay, each subdivision man po, they have their own laws and requirements which can be above the minimum. So, i-discuss mo natin later how you can properly position it.
Okay, sir.
Mm-mm. Pero sakto no, natoy katong 5 by 4 or even 3 by 5 din sa uban nga pwede na to mabutangan. Pero ato sa nang i-discuss how you can position it kay i-discuss sa nato balik ang requirements sa habitable rooms kay this part mo sa car park dili na habitable and na requirement pud sa fire code na asa lang siya pwede ma-position. So ang access tapos na cases no, what if nasa corner lot, what if naka sa isolated lot, and what if kanang nakay underground. So nahinana nga mga concerns atong ikuan tanawon or basement baka. Other concerns? Hello? Napa may pangutana?
Dexter din, Dexter Flores.
So I think wala na yung pangutana. I can stop the recording now and